Why there's a good chance Jarren Duran does not end up getting traded at the trade deadline.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I'm here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part, it's free. So make sure you just continue to tune in because Locked On is here for you every single day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the show. We are getting closer and closer to the trade deadline as it is less than 10 days away now, which is just beyond crazy to me. This season has absolutely flown by. And while the first couple months of it were rough for the Red Sox, they have started to turn things around as of late. Immediately after the Rafael Devers trade, things were a little bit rocky, but since then, they've been playing better baseball. They've been able to have more lineup flexibility in terms of who can play where, when, and rotating various guys into the lineup to make sure that they're getting the playing time that they deserve. And they've been clicking in a lot of different areas of their game. So today's episode is going to be all about the trade deadline coming up. Will Jarren Duran end up getting traded at this year's deadline? Also, the Red Sox are going to be buyers. What exactly is that going to look like? And also talking about Ryan O'Hearn versus Josh Naylor, which one could be more preferable and desirable for the Boston Red Sox. So, Jarren Duran, the name who's been brought up the most in conversations about potentially being traded away from the Boston Red Sox at the trade deadline. Another name who's been mentioned a lot is Aroldis Chapman, but because the Red Sox are playing good baseball right now, they don't want to give up their all-star closer who's having one of the best seasons of his career right now. If you're making a playoff push, you're going to need a guy like Chapman out there. So Jarren Duran is the biggest name who has the biggest chance of being traded by the Boston Red Sox if you were to look at the roster as it stands right now. And that is because the Red Sox do have a wide variety of talent in the outfield. And with the way that Wilyer Abreu, Cedar Rafaela, and Roman Anthony have been playing, it would be very difficult to justify trading one of them, which leaves Duran a little bit as the odd man out. But there is a good chance Jarren Duran does not get traded. Now, if the Red Sox were going to be sellers at the deadline, it would be a no-brainer for them to try to trade Jarren Duran and maybe even look into trading one of their other outfielders whose value is very high as well. But the reason why Jarren Duran is likely to still be in Boston after the trade deadline is because Craig Breslow has said in the past that they don't feel this need to trade one of the outfielders. They don't feel like it's a mandatory move to ship somebody out at the deadline just because they have an overload of outfielders. If anything, he said he sees it as a good thing that they have the outfield depth and that there's a lot of talent out there and that they could continue to roll with what they have on this roster rather than trying to make moves to move somebody when it's not necessarily always mandatory or necessary. And Craig Breslow said recently, too, that the Red Sox would have to be blown away by offers for their top players in order for them to be moved. And there have been teams who have been open to Jarren Duran. I know there have been teams who have contacted the Red Sox about him, but as of right now, the Red Sox still have not gotten any offers that have come close to the type of package that they would need to move him. Now, the Padres are a team who are one of those options for Duran. They are a team that has been interested in him for a while. They have contacted the Red Sox, and AJ Preller, who is the president of baseball operations and GM for the Padres, knows how to make deals, and he has always been very persistent when it comes to trying to acquire players that he wants. And Jarren Duran, if he's a player that he's really interested in, could go all out and blow the Red Sox away with a potential package. And if that's the case, the Red Sox might say, okay, here you go. Because they see it as a situation where they could trade an outfielder because they do have the talent and depth in the outfield right now. So they don't necessarily need everybody to stay. But they also don't necessarily have to, because they don't see a point in settling for a package that involves one of their outfielders, particularly Duran, if they don't see it as making sense. Because injuries, unfortunately, are part of the game. And if somebody were to go down with an injury, you need to have that backup option. So theoretically, say Wilyer Abreu got hurt again, just using him as an example. Then you still have Jarren Duran out there to provide defense in the outfield every day so that you can continue to keep rolling with winning games, because then you can have Duran, Anthony, and Rafaela still out there on a daily basis. So in that regard, it's beneficial to have him, especially because you want to try to avoid having Yoshida play in the outfield as much as possible, since defensively, that's not exactly his biggest strength in his game. And that was the biggest reason why the Red Sox even moved him primarily to DH in the first place last year, because they just didn't trust his defense enough in the outfield to where they could justify feeling like they wanted to have him continue to play defense. So because of that circumstance, having Duran in a Red Sox uniform, they feel like provides them value in many different ways, especially because of his versatility with his speed and the fact that he can cover lots of ground in the outfield. Has his bat been as good this year as it has been in the past? No, but the Red Sox really value him hitting in that leadoff spot. And that's why it's going to take a huge package in order for the Red Sox to say, yes, we are going to move him. Now, all of that being said, if the Red Sox do move Jarren Duran, that still doesn't mean they are sellers. They can move Jarren Duran and still be buyers, because ideally in a Jarren Duran trade, they would get strong pitching back in return that they can add to their rotation or bullpen, depending on who the arm is, that helps them now and addresses needs that they have right now, which we all know is pitching. That's what the Red Sox need in order to get themselves truly in a spot where they feel like they can be a World Series contending team. So they can trade Duran, but also add to fill holes that they currently have on this roster that they need to put them over the top. But they can also acquire that pitching in other ways by not moving Duran and just seeing what else is out there in terms of offerings. Because if they trade for a number 3 starting pitcher, for example, the return wouldn't have to be as high, and that might not require giving up a major league player when you can just focus on giving up some prospects who are on the more talented side. And a couple of the names might hurt in that kind of deal, but they are not going to do the type of deal that they did for Garrett Crochet, because he is their ace. They don't need to go that aggressively on the starting pitching market. So based on what they had to give up for Crochet, they could get a number 3 starter without having to necessarily give up a major league player. Now, keep in mind that they got Crochet in the offseason, and the price for these players is usually a lot greater at the trade deadline, because teams know that teams are desperate and they need to fill that need. So they're using that to their advantage, and the packages that they're expecting are a lot more. But if they go out there and they get a starter to fill into the middle of the rotation because of how well Brian Bayo and Lucas Giolito have been throwing, they can feel good about that and still have Jarren Duran on the team. So there's a really strong chance, again, that Jarren Duran does not get traded at this upcoming trade deadline. Circumstances would have to line up perfectly in everybody's favor, and the Red Sox would have to see the package as sufficient, and they are not actively making calls on him because they do not actively see him as somebody they have to trade now. So we'll see how that all plays out. If the Red Sox do decide in the offseason they want to trade Duran, then they can ultimately do that. Teams know that the return for him will probably be less in the offseason too. So that's why there's a likely chance that that could be the time that the Red Sox decide to trade him if they do want to. So with where we are at right now, the chances of Duran getting traded are not as big as you might think. There would not be any surprise to me at all if the outfield stays the same past the trade deadline, and every name that's in the outfield right now is still out there, unless, again, some team comes out of nowhere and offers the Red Sox just this incredible package for Duran that they cannot say no to. Otherwise, they don't see it as a desperate move. They're fine with keeping him. Speaking of the trade deadline, are the Red Sox buyers or sellers? That question will be answered coming up next. Managing money can be really difficult. I know because I've been there, and that's where I started getting involved with Monarch Money, because Monarch Money has helped me manage my money so much more. It helps me to filter out different subscription services that I had that I didn't even realize I had, that I don't need to be paying for. And I've been able to save so much money since then, because it's important to value your money and save it up for longer term investments. And I was having a lot harder of a time doing that because of all these random things that I was paying for that I didn't even know. So Monarch Money has helped me navigate that significantly. What exactly is Monarch Money? It's more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. As an adult, my mom always has lectured me on saving money. So Monarch Money is for you if you're also in that same position. Are the Boston Red Sox buyers or sellers at the trade deadline? That is the age-old question that has been buzzing among Red Sox Nation as of late. What direction are the Red Sox going to go in when it comes to this upcoming trade deadline? And if this question had been asked in the first couple months of the season, the answer would have likely been sell, because this team is not competitive. You have some key veterans that could get you a good return. For example, Alex Bregman and Aroldis Chapman, both guys who have made significant contributions to this Red Sox team this season, and are both guys who could be a good rental option for a team to make a playoff push, especially a guy like Aroldis Chapman, who's probably nearing the end of his career and has been having one of the best seasons of his career this year in Boston. He could be a great player for a team that's making a playoff push. So earlier on in the season, the thought was, yeah, Aroldis Chapman is an easy trade piece for the Red Sox for sure. But ever since then, that has faded out a little bit. Why? Because the Red Sox have started to play better baseball, and they have started to win some games. And to me, that signifies we are going to be buyers at the trade deadline, because this team is figuring out how to win. And that was one of the biggest things that I was watching for with this team, was what improvements are they going to make, and what changes are going to be made in terms of the approach to allow them to be more successful. And they definitely have started to find their stride a little bit. And when it comes to, are the Red Sox going to be buyers or sellers? They are buyers. The Boston Red Sox are buyers at the trade deadline. How did we get there? Because the Red Sox started to get healthier again, and they started winning games. And that's the biggest thing. And Craig Breslow earlier on in July, and Sam Kennedy as well, both were talking about the trade deadline and didn't really say for sure what direction they wanted to go in, whether they were going to buy or sell, because at that point there was still some uncertainty with what they were going to do because of where the Red Sox were at the time. Then they strung together 10 wins in a row heading into the All-Star break. And now all of a sudden they feel like the vibes are higher and they feel like guys are really coming into their own. And Craig Breslow envisioned this team to be a playoff team because with the perfect combination of players, they felt like they could do it. And by trading Rafael Devers, he felt like that was addition by subtraction, because he said, now we have more roster flexibility. We can go and utilize that money and allocate it to other areas of the roster that we need to improve on. And it can help us feel like a more complete and full baseball team. So that's where they are at now, is excited to add to this team. Craig Breslow has come out and said, we plan to improve the team for 2025 and beyond. They primarily want to focus their efforts on the starting pitching market and on the first base market. And Breslow has said, we believe that this team can make a deep run this season. And there has been some talk from ownership and higher ups within the Red Sox organization that there is a ton of pressure to make the playoffs this year. And it's basically a non-negotiable concept. Basically, ownership saying, we have to be a playoff team this year. So whatever that looks like, go and do it. And Sam Kennedy has also said that ownership has given him the all clear to be able to make the commitment to being a playoff team, even if that means from a financial standpoint, committing more money to a player than they might necessarily not be as used to in the last few seasons. So the Red Sox are essentially, from an organizational standpoint, all on the same page of saying, we want to make the playoffs and we will do our best to try to do that, whatever it takes. So it's interesting because when it comes to where this Red Sox team is at right now and wanting to be buyers, it's going to be so difficult if they buy and then they just continue to float barely around the third wild card spot and then they end up missing the playoffs. That is the gamble that you take at the trade deadline anyway. It's always a gamble no matter what. So in that regard, obviously there are some unknowns that come with that, but by ownership saying we have to make the playoffs this year, that is a must do, whatever it takes, go do it. That's putting pressure on Craig Breslow. And there has been some reading into that of saying, is ownership essentially saying that Craig Breslow's job is in jeopardy if the Red Sox don't make the playoffs this year? That very well could be the case. They fired Chaim Bloom and brought in Craig Breslow because they felt that he was a better fit to help the Red Sox on their journey of doing what they're trying to do, which is build a successful, sustainable future. And now that they have a strong core in place and the team is playing better baseball, they want to make the playoffs. And now Craig Breslow and company are on the hot seat and understanding the fact that it's on them to make the moves to continue to improve this team at the deadline. So with the Red Sox declaring themselves buyers, what exactly does that look like? Does that mean they go out and focus their efforts on just starting pitching? Do they go out and look on the first base market? Do they go and look on the relief market? Do they go and look on the backup catching market? Craig Breslow has essentially made it clear that their priorities are first base and a starting pitcher. They are open to exploring other parts of the roster as well. If there is a proposed trade that makes sense for them, he wouldn't completely close the door on it altogether because it's not as much of a priority or something that he sees as much of a priority. But they're definitely remaining open to that while primarily focusing on the starting pitching market as the biggest piece of the puzzle here that they feel like will complete the team at this trade deadline. So it's interesting because you have Craig Breslow in here who said, we are going to plan to be buyers at this deadline, and we believe in the team that we have in front of us. And Craig Breslow is somebody who has shown that he hasn't been afraid to make some noise and move players if it means the baseball team is better off. And that's why I'm not taking that comment lightly of him saying we are going to be buyers at this deadline, because being buyers could look so much different for Craig Breslow than what we're used to seeing from the Red Sox over the past few seasons of kind of being half in, half out, not really doing anything drastic at the deadline. This is the year where I could see them maybe doing something drastic, or at least acquiring somebody who they feel slots right in. That makes a lot of sense, and they aren't afraid to pay the price for it. And it really gets you thinking of, could this roster look a little bit different after the trade deadline? Yes, but I don't necessarily see it as looking significantly different, because they do value a lot of the players they have on this team right now. So in this situation, it feels like a scenario in which the Red Sox are going to try their absolute best to improve the team without having to pay the price of losing major league talent that they already have on this roster, and be able to feel confident at the end of it that they made moves that are best for them. The Red Sox are going to be buyers at this trade deadline, unless, of course, they just go and they drop the rest of their games leading up to the deadline. Then maybe we're having a different conversation again, but Breslow is sold on the idea. The whole front office is sold on the idea. Ownership is sold on the idea. And that is exciting, because they've said having a surplus of good players isn't a bad thing. The high-end depth is a really good thing. It's not like we're anxious to move away from that. And Bregman said out of his own team, we're a very dangerous team now, especially when we're prepared and executing. We've played good for a while now. People will say this is a hot streak, but I believe this is who we are. So when you have players being vocal about how the team should be buyers as well, and that they believe in themselves, that's really telling. And Alex Bregman, of all people, being a player who is really valued and highly regarded among Major League Baseball, and he has surrounded himself with all this young talent that the Boston Red Sox have. He believes in them, and the front office should listen to somebody like that, their leader, their veteran, and go out and add to this roster. And chances are they 100% will do that. They're going to be buyers at this trade deadline. And when they're buyers, are they going to look in depth at the first base market? And if so, O'Hearn or Naylor? That's coming up next. I used to work in a job that was constant phone calls all the time. It was recruiting. It was a temporary job for me when I was in between sports jobs, and I was just calling candidate after candidate every day. So I was on the phone all the time, and it was very easy to miss calls. And if you missed calls, that was unfortunate, because then you could lose out on business and money, because it's the sales industry. So that's where OpenPhone comes in, because if you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or computer. OpenPhone is offering Locked On Red Sox listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. That's OpenPhone.com/LockedOnMLB. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Game changer right there. The Red Sox at the trade deadline, as we get closer and closer, have been calling teams about players they might be interested in, keeping their eye on players they might be interested in. And this is a fun time of year for baseball, because it's always when people speculate what their team's going to do and what direction they are going to take. And the biggest thing that I've always talked about is just pick a side, either buy or sell. And this year, it seems like the Red Sox are really picking a lane, because Sam Kennedy actually said that everyone among the Red Sox front office is absolutely on board with adding players, even if it requires a strong cash commitment, if it's a fit that helps the team get to where they want to go. absolutely 100% ownership is committed to it at the deadline. So this is a year where it feels like the Red Sox are going to be true buyers instead of just trying to half make commitments to that. Now, a lot of people are saying, I want to get rid of Connor Wong. That doesn't feel to be of high priority right now. And it's complicated because he is Brian Bayo's catcher. And Brian Bayo has pitched very well with him catching. Wong has caught 8 of Bayo's 9 straight 5+ innings pitched, 3 earned runs or less games, and he plays a fine defense. Obviously, his bat has been horrid, but I don't know that the Red Sox would want to risk giving Brian Bayo another catcher when he's been pitching so well with him behind the plate, and they're going to need Bayo to continue to pitch at the level he's pitching at if they want to be a threat in the postseason. So get that idea out of your head. It may happen, but I don't think that it's as for sure of a thing as you may suspect it is. But the first base situation is something that's an area of potential need for the Red Sox at this deadline because they've had Romy Gonzalez and Abraham Toro platoon there ever since Tristan Casas went down with a season-ending injury. And while that platoon option has been more than durable because both of those guys have been performing above expectations, at the trade deadline, the Red Sox want to explore the first base market to potentially acquire an everyday first baseman. Now, the primary options right now are Ryan O'Hearn from the Orioles and Josh Naylor from the Diamondbacks. Now, the interesting thing with this scenario is that there are pros and cons to both. Now, Josh Naylor of the Diamondbacks, that one's tough because the Diamondbacks, as of right now, are not expected to be sellers, but there is still a good possibility that they do. They just haven't necessarily come out and said that yet. But he's a very good player and an RBI guy, which is someone the Red Sox seriously could consider. He's 28 years old and batting over 300 for the Diamondbacks right now. And he is a guy that I could see the Red Sox really valuing in that regard. He's on pace for about 20 home runs on the season, but he's a guy who could be an everyday first baseman. He could hit against both righties and lefties. He's not as good against lefties, but it's still durable enough to where the Red Sox could rely on him primarily every day at first base. And then for a platoon position, they could have their platoon be at second base and continue to have Romy Gonzalez and Marcelo Meyer platoon at second while they have Naylor out there in the lineup every day at first base. Now, the downside to both him and O'Hearn are that both of them are left-handed bats. And I know the Red Sox probably would prefer a right-handed bat to help balance out the lineup, but those are their best bets when it comes to first base. And Naylor is a guy who could provide a lot of value in a lot of different ways with his bat. His on-base percentage is a 362 and his slugging percentage is a 452. And he's hit 11 home runs. So he's not a huge power bat, but he is a guy who can make good contact. And the Red Sox could utilize him every day at first base. Now, on the flip side of that, there's Ryan O'Hearn of the Orioles. He is one who could be harder for the Red Sox to acquire because he plays for a division rival and the Orioles might not want to make a trade with a division rival, but because the Red Sox have a lot of talented prospects in their system that they could give to Baltimore, that could be something that intrigues them. He made his first All-Star appearance this year, but because the Orioles have struggled, it would make a lot of sense for them to try to move him. He's hitting 278 with a 373 on base percentage and 451 slugging with 12 home runs, 36 RBIs, and an 825 OPS. He was an All-Star for the first time in his career this summer, and rightfully so. He deserved it, and he's just had a standout season with the Orioles. Now, he's not as good of an overall player as Josh Naylor in terms of what he provides and the value that he's bringing this season. So if they were to get O'Hearn, they could use him as a platoon guy, and rather than having Abraham Toro continue to platoon at first base, they just have Romy Gonzalez platoon at first with O'Hearn, and then Marcelo Meyer becomes the everyday second baseman. That's something that could happen too, because you could have Ryan O'Hearn take the at-bats against righties and then Romy Gonzalez against lefties, and you can slot them both in accordingly based on the pitching matchup in that regard. So in that aspect, that could be beneficial for the Red Sox because it also leaves room for flexibility in terms of, for example, if they want both of them in the lineup on the same day, then they have Romy play second and then they have O'Hearn play first base. And then if there's a lefty pitching, then okay, because O'Hearn is a left-handed hitter, he might struggle a little bit, but you have Romy who's a righty who could provide that kind of value. And then vice versa, if there's a right-handed pitcher on the mound, then O'Hearn could be the guy to crush baseballs against him. So there's a couple different avenues they could take with this, and the way that their lineup goes based on that could change. And we could see a platoon at second base if the Red Sox bring in Josh Naylor because he is durable and good enough to where he could just be an everyday first baseman. Or if they do decide to bring in O'Hearn, that could be a platoon scenario because he struggles significantly against lefties. And that's where Romy could come in and help out there. And then Marcelo Meyer gets more playing time at second. So ultimately, they could go either avenue. But either way, acquiring one of those two players would help the Red Sox improve after the trade deadline. And it would give them a little bit of a greater sense of confidence, knowing they have a little bit more of a consistent first baseman there, as opposed to relying on Abraham Toro to keep up what he was doing earlier on in the season down the stretch. Ryan O'Hearn would likely be a little bit cheaper than Josh Naylor. I do feel like Naylor would be the best choice in terms of an everyday first baseman with where the Red Sox are at right now, but the package might be a little pricey, so it also depends on what they would have to give up to get either of these players. But the first base market is certainly something the Red Sox are going to be exploring heavily, and I would not be surprised to see one of those two names in a Boston Red Sox uniform after this trade deadline. But hopefully they make the right decisions come trade deadline time. I believe in this team. I believe that they can still make a run as long as they go about things the right way over this next week and a half or so. Thank you so much for tuning into Locked On Red Sox and making it your first listen of every day. Be sure to next check out Locked On MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can get local analysis on a national scale regarding every game, every night, all season long. Our experts here at Locked On will keep you updated on every game that took place that day. So make sure that you check that out next on any podcast platform. As always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I'll catch you on the flip side.